You know, when you really think about it, the internet is such a strange and wonderful place. It allows you to do stuff like access information from all over the planet, or maybe just stream this YouTube video while hanging out with your friends, or maybe do something like get on social media and watch your favorite content creators absolutely freak out and attack their own fans. Yes, that's right, we're going to be talking about the last one today, because it seems like Ed Boon is very mad about the fact that anybody is mentioning his microtransactions. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and let me just start off by saying this is not an attack on Ed Boon. In general, I actually think that this guy is a super genius. He's obviously the creator of things like Mortal Kombat and Injustice, two series that I am absolutely in love with. But recently, I actually reviewed Mortal Kombat 11. I did a big deep dive expose, and the thing that I really noticed about it is while that game is very influential in how it's trying to basically push the industry in a new direction, I think that it has some issues. The characters are great, the combat is great, the online is great, but it is filled with microtransactions. I mean, to the brim, Mortal Kombat 11 has probably thousands of dollars of purchasable content. Yes, you heard me exactly correct, and yes, people have done the math. And it seems like Ed Boon himself is actually upset that anybody would mention this. So let's start off by talking a little bit about the math. So basically, within Mortal Kombat 11, there is a pretty big roster, lots of different people you can play as, and each one has about 60 different costumes you can unlock. Now let's just play out the hypothetical real quick. Say you're somebody who decided to purchase the game and then just play it. You want to do some versus matches and you're not particularly interested in doing a bunch of the story mode or doing any of the unlockable towers. Instead, you're just curious about playing it for fun and you're a little bit curious. How do I get all the optional content? Well, you can play the game, and a lot of the stuff is unlocked via these challenges, but additionally, you can spend some real-life cash. There's a system within the game called Time Krystals. So basically, a huge part of this game, and the one aspect of it that I absolutely hated, is something called the Crypt. This is basically a little dungeon that you explore, and as you go through it, you can spend currencies that are earned in the game, or via basically spending real-life cash, and actually open up different treasure chests. This will give you special intros, cool taunts, and of course, things like fatalities, along with cosmetics, which means that, in my opinion, this in some way does influence the game. I mean, I'll just say it, this is an old phrase, but cosmetics are in a way part of gameplay. Yes, they're not actually breaking the balance, but they're still actually an interpretation of it. This stuff is cool because we want it. Unlocking the stuff is a big drive, it's a big motivator, and if you want, it is possible to purchase basically every skin in the game. Now, the problem with this is that if you calculate it out, all the characters versus the 60 skins per character, you could spend over $4,000 on microtransactions. People have done the numbers, and there's a little bit debate as to how big this number is, but it's very obviously close to that, which is, well, obviously angering a lot of people. Everybody wants this game to be as spectacular as possible, but let's face it, gamers, we are cheap, and I mean that in a good way, which is that we want to try and get the most bang for our buck. If we're buying a $60 game, we want to play it until it's just absolutely gotten every drop of content, and then if we're still loving it, purchase DLC. The older I get, the more I actually like the idea of good DLC. I feel like stuff like The Last of Us having those additional chapters, or maybe even something like the way BioShock later on did some really interesting stuff with the Burial at Sea DLC that added a lot to the universe. Good DLC should absolutely be championed and really supported, but stuff like this, in my opinion, isn't downloadable content. It's actually a microtransaction, and Ed Boon doesn't want to sing that. So late last night, Ed Boon decided to basically tweet out the fact that anybody referencing an article that was being spread around that said, there are $6,000 of microtransactions in this game, he basically called them liars and said that they should not be spreading misinformation. Now, in my opinion, and this is a pretty strong one that might get me in some trouble, I actually think that Ed Boon is lying. I think that Ed Boon is very, very aware about the fact that his game is extra grindy and is actually filled with all sorts of tiny price tags. He is trying to get you to basically spend tons and tons of money for stuff that is already on the disc, and he wants to try and obfuscate that. He wants to try and basically hide that fact via these tweets. He wants to try and basically misdirect you. And the reason I know this is because Ed Boon actually messaged me last night. This is not a joke. Ed Boon, the creator of Mortal Kombat, messaged me on Twitter to basically say, hey, I liked your review. Thank you so much for the feedback, positive and negative. It's really helping us out. But we do feel like you got some information wrong when it came to the crypt. Well, what did I say in my review? That the crypt was a money sink. He basically did not like the fact that I brought a bunch of attention to the crypt, to the fact that you could spend such a ginormous amount of money on something that, in my opinion, should all be free. Now, you know what? This is my major issue, is that this is the type of game that, in my opinion, is some of the most dangerous because it's trying to trick you into buying what should obviously be price tagless content. I mean, they actually even do this at the very start. There is one hidden locked character within the game, which is Frost. And here's the thing, you can unlock Frost through natural means. Just by playing the game, you'll actually eventually get her on the roster and she's fully accessible, playable, and fightable. But here's the thing, you can also just buy it right up front. At the beginning, there are technically 2 Day 1 DLC characters. Shao Kahn, which is obviously the pre-order bonus, but if you didn't pre-order it, then you're probably going to be buying that later on, and Frost. These are 2 characters that can cost you real-life money to get when they absolutely have already been created. They are in the game, they're balanced, they're ready. This is not future content, this is not a season pass, this is stuff that is on the disc that they want to trick you into buying, and that right there is my issue. Now, I'm just going to warn you, there's somebody actually using equipment right outside my office window, so I apologize if you hear that. But here's the thing, Ed, these people are not lying when they talk about the Time Krystals. These people are not lying when they're talking about this being an issue. The thing here is that most of us absolutely trust in NetherRealm Studios. You guys are making some absolutely spectacular fighting games. The issue arises with the fact that we don't trust your parent company, WB. They were able to cram a ton of microtransactions into Shadow of War, the previous freaking Lord of the Rings game, and we're actually a little bit paranoid that they'll try and do this again with Mortal Kombat. When situations like this arise, it's very difficult not to try and compare it to other games within the genre. There is a huge amount of disparity between fighting games. I mean, just look at something like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which had over 50 playable characters that were all great, or maybe something modern that's absolutely insane, which of course is Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This came out recently and is just an explosive seller, but beyond this, it's actually getting its first DLC right now, and people have been talking about the fact that they just released Joker. Joker is very, very cheap. It costs a couple bucks. And if for some reason you wanted to buy Joker individually, you get the character, his special stage, all of his new soundtracks, all of his taunts, all of his costumes for $5. This is less than it costs for one $7 DLC costume in Mortal Kombat 11. Look, Ed Boon, we're not attacking you, we're not saying you suck, we're not saying that your game is terrible, we're saying that these business practices are extremely worrying. I mean, if this trend continues, who knows what the ceiling could be? Perhaps we'll have a thing where in the future, you get the characters on the disc and every single outfit costs you additional money. If that happens, we'll literally be playing Goo Goo Gaga dress up with every freaking game, and that is not a future I want. Me personally, I like value. I like to have the biggest game possible and then support it by purchasing the additional content. You know, it's a little bit controversial, but I loved Final Fantasy 15. It had a lot of problems, and yes, there was a freaking crazy amount of updates that were required to get it up to a good condition, but the downloadable content, in my opinion, was interesting and different. I purposely bought that because I wanted to support the developers. Not everybody will agree with that, but it's one of those things where I feel like voting with your dollar trailer is something that can be weaponized. We actually can send very clear messages of what works and what doesn't. Like just this morning I did my giant review of Days Gone, and that's something that I do not think that people should purchase day one. I mean, it's one of those things where if you want to try and vote to Sony that they need to try and make big giant good exclusives, that's something that I think you should buy on sale or possibly rent. It's just one of those things that's, it's worrying, it's confusing, and I think that Ed Boon knows it. Ed Boon is trying to trick you whether he'll admit it or not. Well, this is just my basic off-the-cuff thoughts around this, and I want to know what you think. Do you think that this is as mischievous and devious as I'm implying, or could this all just be a common misunderstanding? Perhaps Ed Boon genuinely believes that his game is just as honest as any Boy Scout, when let's face it, it absolutely is not. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed that video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Oh my god, I can't believe that dude was mowing right in the middle of this video. Literally minutes of it was just this. I can't believe this is happening. I'm just sitting here trying to record and there's a dude doing this right now. He's got the world's slowest mower. Come on, buddy. Drink a Red Bull. It gives you wings. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.